We are going to have some issues maybe with sound, so can everybody at home hear me well? Yes, okay. I'm gonna close this door, I think. All right, and so let's,
I
yes,
have a question, just, so we can't see the room. So we're not going to be able to see who's speaking. Is that correct?
no, what should happen is that the people who are speaking can unmute, or what people will do is just come up here.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
we do, absolutely, good point. We want people to see each other. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 of us here in the room, which is pretty good. So, and there's Brittany entering. So what you've got now are the people who are in the room entering, and they've got their cameras off, obviously, but we'll give it a shot. All right, so this does mean it seems to be connecting. Yeah.
Is everyone on the Wi-Fi now? Not.
No.
Okay, we're gonna reset the router. We didn't want to like shut you all down abruptly, so.
Yeah. Are you going to shut down the router now?
We were going to, if you're not on it, but if you're on it, do you want to just leave it as it is?
Can we just leave it as it is? And when you guys need to, you can come up and talk. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So, I want to call the meeting to order. Yes. Call to order. Okay. So the meeting is called to order. Let us review the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And so you guys can't see this screen, Ellen?
Before we get to the minutes, I have a question about the agenda.
Sure.
I noticed that the announcement of the VP was under closed session.
Yeah, and
Which
that's incorrect. That's incorrect.
Okay,
Yeah, that's incorrect. We're not going to go to closed session, and it's not going to be a confidential vote.
okay.
Is that good? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it was not so much the vote as the announcement of the results. That I think votes need to be not in closed session in order to comply with the Brown Act. So
Yeah, and we're already on that plan. So
okay,
thank you for
thanks.
that. Yeah. Okay. So I do not have. So can you guys see my screen or not? What do you see? Just me and everybody else here.
Just you.
But you guys see that. So what I'm going to do is, what do you guys think over here? Because what I don't have is the agenda. I need to see the agenda. All right. Can't hear you, Kim.
I just need to, for those of us online, I need to let you know that we can't hear people other than Melanie when they're speaking in the room. So
what we're going to do is we're just going to have people come up. And that's just how we're going to go about this.
I wanted to ask if Jennifer is subbing.
Yes, Jennifer.
Jennifer's subbing for Sabrina.
Jennifer is
Thank
subbing for Sabrina.
Thank you.
She'll be here. Yes, she'll be here
She'll-
eventually.
Right. But
Yeah,
for the-
thank you.
Yeah, for this, she's subbing. Okay. So, do we have an approval of the agenda now that we know that we're not going to close session, and now that we know that the vote for the VP is a roll call vote? Can I second? Okay, all right. So moved by Kathy, seconded by Ben. Thank you for that. The Academic Senate community values, I talked to Steering about this. One of the things that I wanted to do with this was encourage different senators to highlight the value that's important to them on any particular day. Okay, so meaning we won't have a set person. Maybe there's a person who on a particular day has has a particular inclination for a value. Would anyone like to Sorry, we just have someone coming in the room.
I'm going behind you.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay. Okay, so the community value, would anyone like to highlight a particular community value today? As we get started for our first Senate retreat in person in a long time?
I have my hand raised.
Thanks, Ellen.
I just wanted to acknowledge that at the summer meeting in July, Ruth, I'm not sure if Ruth is here right now, but she had made the point that we really should work on our community values or standards together in the current formation of the Senate. And she suggested that we do that today at the retreat. It doesn't look like there's time on the agenda set aside for that, but I didn't want that thought of hers to get lost. I also agree that just using, although I completely support the values, I was part of the Senate that developed them. I do think for them to have real meaning and depth, they need to come from the current group. So I'm sure we have a lot of other stuff to do this fall, but I just want to put it out there that maybe that's something we should set aside some time, if not today, then at some point to really consciously reaffirm rather than just recycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Today's super tight because we have absolute time deadlines. 9:30 to 10 for the lawyer, 10 to 11 for Frank Harris. So our timelines are really tight. And I think I don't want to rush a discussion of the community values, which is why it's not on the agenda. Ruth said that she wanted us to reconsider. I didn't remember her saying at this particular meeting. So perhaps that's my fault. Okay. All right. So any particular community value someone would like to highlight now? Okay, Cornelia wants to highlight one. Cornelia, why don't you come up here? Come here and then. I can't. No, it's right in front of you. It's right here.
But that's too small for me.
Okay, but can you at least come close to the speaker?
Commit to working with equity mindset and to upholding the mission of the college to foster an equitable, inclusive, respectful, participatory, and supportive community dedicated to the success of every student. As senators, we should center equity in all matters brought before us and question who may benefit from our decisions and actions and who may be harmed.
All right, thanks, Cornelia. I think it's a great one to choose today. Okay, we have our Zoom meeting guidelines, which I think everyone is familiar with, and we are recording the meeting. Public meeting guidelines. Now we're at the minutes. Has everyone looked at the minutes? Do I have,
Melanie,
yes?
I'm sorry, my hand is up.
Oh, sorry,
I
Anna, there's so much on my screen. It's hard to see the hands. So thanks for letting me know.
Sorry to interrupt. I could not hear Cornelia at all.
Yeah.
Could you just reiterate which one
Yes,
she highlighted?
absolutely. She highlighted, where are those? Hold on. She highlighted the last one, number 8, right? Number 8. Yeah. Okay, Anna, does that answer your
you.
question? Good. Okay, all right. Okay, so the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Tara, seconded by Joy. Thank you. And can we vote? Does this need to be a roll call? This should be a roll call. Does this need to be a roll call vote? No. Okay. So how can I have a vote, please? I'm gonna look online. All right. Online. Let me call people. Anna.
Yes.
All right. Juan.
Yes.
Ellen.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Okay. And then in the room, everyone else? Any abstentions? One abstention from Russell. Okay. Okay, so the minutes are approved. And in the room, we have our new Senate Assistant, Margarita Silva, who will be doing minutes for us this first time. So we're very happy to have her here. Margarita will bring you up so people can see you on camera. That'll be good. All right, so it's the 30-day requirement to revote for the online meetings. Can I get a move to approve that? Move to approve by Kim Monda, second.
I second.
Thank you, Ellen. Right. Let's see, we need to do the roll call vote for online. Anna,
Yes.
Juan,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
perfect. People in the room? Okay, all right, excellent. Thank you, everyone. That is moved by acclamation. Okay, and this is the Senate Vice President election. So I'm going to sit down, and Kim, who is the past president, is going to come up here and run the Vice President election. Not in closed session and not with the confidential ballot.
Good morning. So we are doing a call for nominations now, and you may nominate yourself or somebody can nominate somebody else. Of course, be sure that person wanted to run for the position. So call for nominations. Who's interested in serving as vice president for this academic year?
Good morning, Kim. I'll nominate myself for vice president.
Thank you, Chris. So Chris Johnson has nominated himself to run for vice president. Do we have any other nominations for this position? I'm looking in the room. All right, so Tara Carter has nominated herself. Thank you. So we have 2 nominees for the position. I'm looking in the room and again on Zoom. Is that all right? So now we will just do a roll call vote. Starting with just going down the list from our from our agenda. And I think you can, now we'll just go with a roll call. I did review Robert's Rules of Order. You can pass and come back if anybody's really feeling that, but I'm thinking for this, you won't need to. All right. So our first person on our list is Ben.
What are we
All right.
voting on? I'm sorry.
We're voting on the 2 nominations for vice president
Right.
to serve in this role. And our 2 nominees are Tara Carter and Chris Johnson.
Are we just voting on them to move them forward to a vote?
No, we're just picking our candidate.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is just we had planned to do a secret ballot. We found out that for Zoom and Brown Act, we need to do a roll call ballot. And so this is how we're doing it. So Jennifer, you will be voting next, which is why you're asking. Good. As a sub for Sabrina. Thank you. Okay, so Ben voted for Tara. Jennifer.
Chris.
All right. Ellen.
Tara.
Chris.
Chris.
Joy. Elizabeth. Kathy.
We can't hear the votes in the room, so could
Okay.
you
I
announce
will
those,
repeat
please?
them. All right. So did you hear Ben voted for Tara? Did I repeat for him and then forget? You heard Jennifer on Zoom. Ellen, we heard you vote for Tara. Chris was on Zoom. Joy in the room voted for Tara. Elizabeth in the room voted for Tara. Kathy in the room voted for Chris. Juan
Chris.
on Zoom. Okay, thank you. Okay. And Jess. Jess in the room voted for Tara. I don't think, has Ruth come in? No. All right, and Ruth did not arrange for a proxy. Okay. Tara in the room voted for Tara. Russell in the room. Anna on Zoom.
Can you please say who?
Sorry, can you
voted for?
repeat?
God, I forgot again. I thought I repeated. So Tara voted for Tara. Russell in the room voted for Tara. Anna
Tara.
and Trisha in the room voted for Tara. And that leaves me in the room, and I'm also voting for Tara. So I'm going to take a moment to count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I see 10 votes for Tara and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes for Chris. So Tara Carter is our Vice President of the Senate for this academic year. Thank you both for running. It's great to have an election where we have 2 candidates, and we'll be doing this again in the spring, the last spring meeting of the Senate, which is when we usually do it. So again, thank you both so much. It's an important commitment and role. We're going to have a really exciting year. Okay. Applause in the room.
All right, everyone. So that moves us on to our next item, which is information and presentations, and almost exactly on time. So we have our lawyer from what is your law firm? I'm sorry, Craig, I should know that.
It's called Griffith and Thornburg.
Griffith and Thornburg, the lawyers for the school, and Craig Price has graciously come to answer some questions and give us a presentation. I sent him, for those of you who completed the request of, what you wanted to know about the Brown Act, I sent him that list of questions. So he should have some idea. And then I'm hoping we have a little bit of time for questions once we get there.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here. The governor just signed a new amendment to the Brown Act this week. I don't know if you read about it, but it provides an expedited means of dealing with disruptive people in legislative body meetings. And that's good news and bad news, because it was specifically because people didn't know how to handle some disruptors in the early 2000s that I got hired by Santa Barbara Unified and by the county board. But being quite a bit older now, I find that I'm glad I don't have to resort to what we used to do. So anyway, there are smoother procedures for dealing with disruptive people. One of the questions that was asked had to do with how many lawsuits there have been against academic senates of community college districts or in general. I'm not aware of any lawsuits against academic senates. I actually had my assistant do a Westlaw search, and there were 2 or 3 things where there was some lawsuit and the people, as one of 10 causes of action, threw something in. So it's not a fertile field, to say the least. There are many Brown Act lawsuits against governmental bodies, county boards of supervisors, city councils, water districts, school districts, and community colleges. The last one I remember dealing with locally, you may recall some issues not too many years ago from Celeste Barber. So she actually, over the Pledge of Allegiance flap, sued the college, and then her lawyer actually brought a Brown Act allegation having to do with her allegedly not having been able to complete her public comments or give her public comments. And we helped out and took care of those summarily, I guess I would say. One of the things I noticed when I looked at your agenda is that you did call for a secret ballot. And that's what we're all used to in most things that we do. But the Brown Act specifically says no secret ballot. So what that means is that there has to be a basis for anybody watching or anybody going back and reading the minutes to be able to know how somebody voted. It's easy if you only have 7 college trustees, but how many senators are there? 30 some? 16? Well, it could be problematic, time consuming to have to go through and call all your names, and then as long as you're doing Zoom meetings, call those names. So you can do it in a more general way and just say, okay, everybody that is present, are you all affirmative? Are there any nays or any abstentions? Then the minutes will reflect who all was present. So they're going to be able to see without having to go through that whole drill. Yes.
So we can still do a show of hands as long as the vote is recorded in the minutes. So we can do that for approve, like when we approve minutes, we didn't have to do a roll call to approve minutes. We could just do a show of hands on Zoom and in the room and record that in the minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
I make a practical distinction between something like approval of the minutes and voting for your vice president. You have a show of hands, but Melanie asked the academic senate president would show, all right, all who are present have voted aye, there are no nays, no abstentions, and then do the same thing for the online. One of the questions.
I have a question regarding the voting. Given that our meetings have been either online or in this case, a hybrid meeting, so the people online cannot see the show of hands. Does that, I know I certainly have a preference for the roll call where I can hear what's happening since I can't see it visually, but I'm wondering if there are any rules around that.
Well, I think like I just heard for your VP vote, Melanie verbally, Kim verbally described what the votes were. So that's certainly satisfactory, but it's really up to this body to decide whether or not you want to actually have a roll call on every vote. And if you want to dispense with the roll call on procedural only votes like approval of the minutes. So that's for you to decide. But it is important, I agree with you, for those who are going to continue to appear by Zoom to be able to follow the proceedings and understand who's voting for what. One of the questions was, can you continue under the so-called emergency authorization? The answer is yes. Under the old original Brown Act that will go into effect at such time as you no longer are operating under the so-called emergency rules, any member of the body who wants to appear virtually has to actually have the agenda posted at their location, and their location has to be posted on your website with your agenda. So you may want to continue to have your meetings this way because it is convenient, especially with so many of you. The question is going to be whether or not the governor is going to continue to authorize that or is going to roll it back at a certain point. So in the meantime, so far, so good. One of the questions had to do with what are the consequences of the Brown Act? You know, our local jails are not full of Brown Act violators, to say the least. It is a misdemeanor to knowingly violate the Brown Act, either knowingly or if you have reason to know, but there are very, very few prosecutions. On a somewhat regular basis, I will be contacted on behalf of one of the local groups that I represent, school districts, by the DA. Somebody will have complained, and ordinarily those kind of things get worked out. Typically, they're political in nature. Somebody wants to make a show, especially sometimes during election campaigns. People think that if they can ding the legislative body in some way, then that's going to get in the newspaper and it's going to be embarrassing. And we've seen that a handful of times around here. I just had one in San Luis Obispo County and Cambria a couple of weeks ago, where the DA, it's a small town, even smaller than Santa Barbara, and the DA was complaining about the school district not having permitted a person's comment who had been on a Zoom, and she didn't identify herself. And so she was cut off, but not knowingly. Well, it turns out that the person who was cut off from giving a comment to the school board happened to be in the same, I don't know, some club. The wives were friends, and the DA calls, and I'm saying, we can do better than this. But anyway, that's just an example, a lot of little things, but also some big things. I've defended lawsuits all the way through trial in the Superior Court. There used to be somebody in town that specialized in handling Brown Act cases. He's no longer doing that, however. So it is serious. Not only the DA has jurisdiction to file actions, but any private person. So if there is some, let's say, error or illegal matter that is on one of your agendas, then anybody in the community can file what's called a notice to cure and correct. And you have 30 days in which to make any correction that may be deemed to be appropriate. That's what happened with Celeste Barber. It was fixed. But if there is no cure and correct, either because we don't agree that there's a problem or it just doesn't happen, then that private party can institute a lawsuit, file an action in the Superior Court. And so those are fairly frequent around the state, not in Santa Barbara County. Like I said, normally they get worked out in consultation with the district attorney, and normally the DA doesn't like to bring an action. They will issue a warning letter. And the bottom line in all this is that insubstantial violations are almost always treated with a warning letter saying, okay, don't do it again. We're not going to make you go back and start all over again. So there are all kinds of different provisions and lawsuits that have occurred that relate to closed sessions, but I don't imagine you have much call to have a closed session, right? It's theoretically possible, but I'm not going to take time. That's a very fertile ground. In terms of, well, what are the top 10 things to remember? That was one of the questions. In particular, I think that this group would be interested in. One thing is make it clear on your agenda, 25 words or less, what the topic is. So if you have general topics of college interest, and then somebody wants to use that to springboard into some very specific concern that's of widespread notoriety, that doesn't work. You've got to pinpoint what it is that you're intending to talk about. The reason for that, I think, is obvious, and that is because if somebody knows that you're actually going to talk about some scandal that broke out somewhere, and they're interested in that, and they would want to come, then they have to be given that opportunity by making sure that the agenda specifies what it is that's going to be talked about. Not in great detail, 25 words or less. In San Diego, we're going to have for example, it was a closed session, a discussion of future building projects. Then they went into closed session and had a big meeting about building that huge new stadium that's down there in San Diego. No, you can't do that. You need to let people know. And they didn't want to let people know because they knew that they were going to get a lot of flack. But that's what the Brown Act is intended to permit. And that is transparencies so that the public actually knows, sometimes regardless of how uncomfortable it is. So a question came up a year and a half ago or so, and I have the question again today. So can you move a discussion item to action? The answer to that is no. That's a Robert's Rules thing. The Brown Act trumps Robert's Rules, but it's easy enough to take care of. On your agenda, you list matters either for discussion or for action. But if you have a discussion item, let's say that according to your traditions, you may wish to move to action, then you just put discussion and possible action, and then it's taken care of. But the Brown Act doesn't recognize or allow something that's agendized for discussion to then result in action being taken. Again, why? I'm guessing you might all know the reason for that, simply because if somebody sees on the agenda that an item is going to be discussed but doesn't call for action, then they may not be as motivated to come as they would if there's actually going to be a vote on it. So, yes, Kim.
So let's say we have an item, we feel like we really could discuss and vote, given the nature of the item, and steering will be making those decisions. We could list it under discussion, but include in the 25 words and for possible action, or do we have to put it into an action section on the agenda?
So I understand your agenda. You have a heading and it'll say procedural, it'll say action, maybe it'll say discussion. Where you may have or want a vote, you would say discussion, maybe in parentheses, possible action, discussion hyphen possible action. And then you have your description, whatever it is.
We online, we can't hear other conversation in the room.
Kim is asking if, so there needs to be additional wording on the top line or the heading. And the answer to that is no. In the body of the description of the item, it doesn't matter. I mean, ideally at the top where it's the heading, it'll say discussion hyphen possible action. But it's acceptable if there's a description of what the discussion is going to be about. And then at the bottom, it says action may possibly be taken. Just whoever reads the agenda needs to be able to see that an item that's labeled for discussion could result in action being taken. Hi.
Can I,
Hang on, I just ran across the room.
okay,
Is there any reason our default cannot simply be discussion with possible action just across the board?
Well, there's no legal reason, but practically you might have let's say a new topic that warrants a considerable amount of discussion. And so you want to start off and just, air out what the item is, have people providing their opinions, let others hear the opinions that are expressed, and then go away and formulate your thinking on that, and then come back and take action. So you can do it that way, but I think there are good reasons for labeling things for pure discussion if there's no intent to take action. And, obviously, this body knows as well as I do that it's important to not always take action based on, what occurs at first blush, but to really reflect on it, because you do a number of critical things for the college.
Can I just add more context to this for especially our newer senators who might not be aware? I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the specific thing we're talking about in this case was when the Senate voted a no confidence against the board. And I believe it was your position and the college's position that we had violated the Brown Act in doing so. It was the position of the lawyer that the Senate consulted that was not the case, and that was a misinterpretation of the Brown Act. So there was disagreement about that. But I think another element of this going forward that's valuable to consider is whether the thing up for discussion is appearing on the agenda for the very first time and then immediately going to action, or whether it's been on the agenda and been discussed multiple times, which was the case in that case with the vote of no confidence. But so there's, people can go back and look at the old YouTube videos or minutes or whatever from, I guess it was that summer of 2020? I can't tell time in pandemic time, but I just think that that context is valuable here for us to remember.
Well, that's interesting that you raised that, and I'm not going to relitigate that. And Rayanne got my good friend Mark Mannion, another lawyer in town, to express an opinion that what occurred there was inconsequential. He didn't say it was perfectly lawful, but be that as it may, just for the record, it wasn't me that jumped into the ring and said the no confidence vote that you took is illegal. There were questions from board members that I addressed, and I did that confidentially so that, anyway, it was confidential, so I'm not able to go on. But well, let me put it this way. I've been doing the Brown Act stuff for well over 20 years. And if you want to keep moving things to action, nobody is probably ever going to slap your hand for it, but it's not correct under the Brown Act. That's all. So I'm just sharing with you the information that comes from the law, something that I know a fair amount about. But thank you, Ellen, for bringing that up. And I have nothing but all the respect in the world for Mr. Mannion. So obviously, there are timing requirements for agendas. They've got to get posted 72 hours in advance. But what happens if 36 hours in advance, you say, oh, gee, we have this additional item that's come up and we really need to deal with it. Can we modify the agenda? Can we just change the agenda to add something? Well, the answer is technically you can't. You cannot change an agenda. However, the workaround is that you notice a special meeting to be held at the same time, the same place, because a special meeting only requires 24 hours notice. So you post an agenda for a special meeting, you have the add-on item, you're running through your regular meeting, and then at any point that you wish, you stop and say, okay, we're gonna recess the current meeting. Now we're gonna go to our special meeting and take it up. And then when that's over with, you go back to your regular meeting. So there's a way to do it. And that actually happens quite a bit with local school districts and sometimes with your board here at the college.
Only have 3 of 10. So my question for Craig is to talk about meetings and serial meetings and what happens, you know, what can be talked about outside of Senate and so on, if you're willing to address that.
Of course.
Thank you.
So did you say, Melanie, there's about 16 of you?
Yeah.
The rule simply is that there cannot be any serial communications or direct communications that would establish a collective concurrence. This is the key part, from among a quorum of you. So everybody in the 3 tables on my left can talk about whatever they want to talk about because you don't represent a quorum. Same thing for the middle row and for the right row. But 2 rows of you together, which may total more than 8 senators, cannot get together. So sure, you can talk among yourselves in normal conversations with 2, 3, 4, even 5 of you outside a meeting at a public gathering. It's just that if there's some issue, say, of controversy, and Melanie sends out an email to all 16 senators, and then people start weighing in. Well, I would be in favor of that. I would be in favor of that. And all of a sudden, there's more than 8 responses, and you put them all together. That's a collective concurrence, and that's a violation of the Brown Act. Does that answer your question? Okay.
If it happens on accident, what can you do to undo it? Like, can you just post it like that email in a public forum, like at the next meeting or something like that? Accidents happen, I guess, a little bit.
You know, usually the people that ask me questions aren't eager to report Brown Act violations. So I had to stop and think about that. That's a very honorable way to approach it. Yes, I think that's the best answer. We noticed that inadvertently there were responses to more than a majority of the senators. And so we are, sorry for that and not taking action on whatever the item was. Nobody is going to complain if you do that. It's almost unheard of, but I like it. That's really the best way to go. Public comment. You have people that they're asked to fill out the comment slips. I think you know that people cannot be required to state their name. There's an old joke. People can come in. It's only funny if you care about the Brown Act and put a brown bag on their head, and that's perfectly fine. They don't have to identify themselves, and period. You could certainly ask them what's the topic you want to speak on, because that's part of your organizational structure. Good question. The question is, in terms of no more than a quorum, how do you handle email? What I always have people do, so for example, if Melanie is sending out a mass email, we're going to be talking about so-and-so. it's always good to remind that this is a one-way email. Sometimes I suggest people say, do not respond to all. And that way you avoid it. People don't always listen to that, unfortunately. Somebody is, eager and wants to weigh in. Yes, Kim,
Please repeat my question.
I will. Go ahead.
If we did a BCC, would that be safer, or do you not want to do that one? If like 2 emails were sent and you use BCC, so you can't reply all, or we should just leave it. for-
Well, BC, I've never even thought of that. That's a great
Could you
idea.
repeat the question for those of us online?
Yes, Kim wants to know if you can avoid the violation of the quorum rule by including everybody as a BCC. So if I send a BCC to 5 people and then somebody hits reply all, does it go to the blind recipients? No, okay. So that's a good way to do it. That allows the author of the email to prevent people from, violating her instruction. I like that. I'll give you credit if I talk to people about that again.
If we agendize something and then like we want to bring an attachment, but we couldn't get the attachment ready 72 hours, you just bring it to the meeting?
It's number 6.
Well, okay.
Number 6. So if there are items that are distributed after the agenda is posted at the meeting, the requirement simply is that that material has to be made available to whoever asked for it. So sure, you can bring something to a meeting, or a day ahead, it can be distributed, but it's got to be made available to whoever asked for it, because it's not always possible to have reports and everything finalized before a meeting. Last, and then I'll sit down unless there's anything else. You all should know, and it's Public Record Act, not Brown Act, but that on issues that relate to college business, not only your pipeline email accounts, but your personal email and your text messages are vulnerable to Public Record Act requests.
I have a question. Yeah. So how could I be forced to hand over to whoever my phone with my email and my password? How would anybody do this? Thanks.
Well, we've all read the last couple of weeks about law enforcement officials coming and seizing certain things. So in theory, somebody can get a court order and can have your phone seized, but that's not the way that it works. The way that it works is typically there's a Public Record Act request. The college, and I can't even remember if we've had to do it, but there can be a search on the server that will pull up emails relating to a certain topic. But when it comes to your personal text or emails, the attorney or somebody in IT would write to you saying, it's been requested that all texts and emails, personal or otherwise, relating to subject A, be produced and be turned over. It's up to you to comply with that in good faith, just like this gentleman wanted to make sure a few minutes ago and talk about what happens if you make a mistake. So it's up to the individual. In rare cases, I've read in the national news, somebody will get a court order and they'll grab that stuff.
Give us a copy of the list of 10. Yeah, we can get to.
So Kim was requesting a list of the 10 things that we should know. Did you? Kim is desperately trying to take the list. Thank you very much.
All right,
All right.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let's see, we have Brittany there. And let's take a quick moment. What we're waiting for right now is, let's see, admit all. There he is. So we're going to just take a quick moment, and we've got Dr. Frank Harris with us. Let me just catch up what Anna was saying, or Anna was saying, sorry. Anna was saying she had a hard time hearing what Cornelia shared. Cornelia was asking, how do they make you, how do you hand over your phone? And the answer was they can make you hand over their phone, but right. If you're famous, right? All right. Hello, Dr. Harris. We'll get ready in a moment. I think a few people are stretching. Yes.
Yep, no worries. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Take your time, no rush on my part.
Okay. All right. And to people who are sort of getting situated or resituating themselves, I will not give up with the speaker situation. I ran through this with IT. What the setup here is a little different. I had asked them if they had Zoom capabilities, and they said yes. And so obviously they don't have a camera. So I know it's not optimal, but for those of us at the zoo, is it nice here in this room? Okay, they're enjoying it. And you know what? I'm gonna do this. Here we go, Ellen, so you can actually see us. Okay, yes? Wave, wave, Russell, wave, wave, wave. There's Margarita. Hello to Tara, our new VP. Okay, Kim's doing calisthenics, right? Definitely a little weird, but at least there we are. Okay. All right. And yeah, let's not open too many doors because of the sound. It's still, you're hearing from my computer, right? It's hard to hear. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and for the people online, can you also speak up, please? Because it's hard to hear. That would be great. Okay. All right, are we ready for Dr. Harris to take it away for us? Yes. Oh, we've got a few people who are coming back. There's a quick bathroom scramble happening here in real life, because there's a massive amount of coffee in the room, suitable for academics.
While we're waiting, I'm looking in envy at Maria Villa Gomez's office, and just how like perfect and organized it looks compared to the mess that I have behind me that you can't see.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. I was admiring all your badges there, and all the presentations that you have given and touched so many people with. So thank you.
Thank you. Just means that I'm old. That's what I tell my students. Like, how did you do all that? Oh, you just, you stick around long enough, you kind of amass a collection of things, but thank you.
I get it. I'm getting gray hairs here by the minute.
Right.
That's your special welcome to SBCC gift, Maria. Okay. I think we should probably get started, because we only have a limited amount of time with Dr. Harris. So.
All right.
You wanted to have a dialogue, and I've slightly changed the picture on the screen here, because the gallery, the sort of request for gallery view from everybody in the room was assuming that we could get our speaker to work differently. So I think this will work. And if it doesn't, just wave us down and we'll figure something else out. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Harris.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Eckford Prosser. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here with you, albeit virtually. I'm sorry I couldn't join you in person. Hopefully I can soon, but I literally have 4 jobs at SDSU. And so this is obviously just an incredibly busy time of the year, and it's really hard to get away from campus for an extended period of time. But I'm excited to join you. Dr. Melly and I have been, in dialogue over the last couple months about the role that the Senate is going to play, the Faculty Senate is going to play in this upcoming year, and thinking about some goals and some things that that the leadership wants to achieve. I know this is kind of a critical time. It's a critical time for the college. It's a critical time for higher education. We're still trying to shake off the effects of the pandemic. We're still, dealing with the effects of the racial, I call it the racial reckoning that took place in the summer of 2020. We are still operating in a very hostile and at times toxic political climate. We're dealing with an economy that seems to be trending downward. And we know that our students are experiencing all of that in a pretty intense way. And so, I think there's a lot of pressure on all of us as educators, particularly community college educators, where, this is where students come to pursue their hopes and dreams, more than any other place, right? The community colleges provide that pathway to prosperity, the pathway to earning a livable wage, right? All the things that when we think about the reasons why we decided to be educators, that, when we were in graduate school, right? Or maybe we were working in industry and decided to take our talents to higher education. We all had a vision for how we wanted to impact the world in a positive way. And I think all of the things that we've been dealing with over the last 2.5 years or so have probably made all of us question, why did we decide to do this at times, right? And wonder if we're in the right place and at the right time, and can we really have the impact that we all had a vision for having? And so, part of my role today is to reaffirm the commitment that we've all made, to remind us, and myself included, that we have important work to do, and that there are students and families and communities that are counting on us to do it. At the same time, we have to take care of ourselves, and we have to take care of each other in doing so. And I wholeheartedly recognize that none of that is easy to do. And so, part of my work and part of what I hope to do today is just to be able to help provide some dialogue, some guidance, maybe answer some questions. I probably should have started with a little bit of my background and not assume that everyone knows who I am. But I'm Frank Harris III. I'm entering just starting my 16th year as a professor of post-secondary education at San Diego State University. I also co-direct the Community College Equity Assessment Lab, which is a research and practice laboratory that I started with my colleague, Dr. J. Luke Wood, in 2011, all with the goal of partnering with community colleges across the country to institutionalize equity efforts. I also serve as the faculty athletics representative at SDSU, which has absolutely no relevance to what we're talking about today, but doing some work in athletics. And then as of this past Monday, I also assumed the role, a half-time position as Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the College of Education here at San Diego State. And so this is work that is both, professional, but is also deeply personal. And, despite all that, I'm on the journey with everyone here, right? I don't have all the answers. I still make mistakes. I still, find myself learning every day. And I find spaces like this is where some of my best learning occurs. The last thing I'll say that, something that is often overlooked, in my bio and my background that I think is really important to say, in the early 2000s, I served as an adjunct professor of speech communication at Los Angeles Trade Tech College. And the reason why that's really, really important to me, because it really, helped me understand what does it mean to really work with students who are disproportionately impacted. My students were students who attended, I taught on Thursday evenings from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And so we really were talking about students who were adult learners and students who were working full-time and, attending part-time. And they had family commitments. They had other things going on outside of their lives that were to be honest, more important than my public speaking class. And so that is such a salient experience for me because it taught me a lot about what it means to be equity focused. Even though I didn't really know what that meant at that time, I often find myself reflecting on those lessons and those experiences and the things that my students taught me. And I'm forever grateful for that experience. And I'm forever grateful for what they've given me because it allows me to be just a better partner and to come to spaces like this with a little bit more empathy and a little bit more grace, not only for our students, but also for our faculty colleagues, and even more importantly, at times for our part-time and adjunct faculty colleagues who are often not recognized and often not well served in our institutions. And that is also here at San Diego State where I work, where we struggle with some of the same issues. So sorry for the long monologue there, but I'm excited to be here and welcome thoughts, reactions, questions. We'd love to know more about what are you hoping to achieve come May at this time, or anything else that may be on your mind. Thank you.
Can't hear.
Yes, I'm having a hard time hearing also. So I don't know if there's a way, maybe if someone has a question, they can come up to the podium and just hop on screen for a second and ask.
I was just asking if anyone in the room had
Oh,
anything that they wanted to say.
it could be a question, it could be a reaction, a thought, fears, trepidation. I mean, whatever it may be. We'd love to have a conversation about it.
I would love to get your comment, your thoughts about those phrases that we use a lot, and we have been using a lot. And I think with real hope, but I also think that it's much, much harder to do than to say, right? Where we talk about safe spaces and brave spaces and courageous spaces and so on. Do you have any thoughts about how we start to even move towards those rather than simply invoking those and thinking that if we say that it's true?
Are we thinking, what does that mean for each other as faculty colleagues or for our students? What's
Yeah,
the kind?
I think riff on that,
Yeah,
whichever way you want to go with that, maybe both.
for sure. I'm going to say something. I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to just be honest and transparent. I don't really use those concepts, to be honest with you. So I never enter a space and said, hey, my job or my hope is to create a safe and a brave space. I understand what that means conceptually, right? I understand why people invoke that, but it could be so, it can mean so many things to so many different people. And so I don't, I guess if we're going to say that, then we have to have, a shared understanding of what that means and what that looks like. And so for me, I would much rather spend the time saying, okay, what are some things that we can commit to in terms of how we're going to engage and dialogue and make sure that we have a context here where we all feel visible, right? We all feel included. We feel like our voices and perspectives matter. We can disagree, but disagree with civility and disagree as colleagues. So I think maybe being clear about what you're trying to create is probably where it should start. And I also find that even in doing that, you gotta revisit it every time you get together, right? So let's say this body meets on a monthly basis. I think it's helpful to kind of start every engagement, every meeting, just saying, let's be clear about what it is we committed to in terms of how we're going to communicate and engage. And the goal there is to ultimately create what we often describe as a safe space or brave space, or every other, the other things that are sort of synonymous with that. And so I don't know if that's a good response. But I think I'm at the point, I've been engaged in this work for a while now. And I'm really trying to challenge myself to really describe and unpack what it is I'm trying to do and what it is I'm trying to achieve, and not relying solely on this abstract concept that some people get, some people don't, some people embrace, some people don't, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. And and there's Professor Art, I'm really, the Professor Art's comment resonates with me. It's not just, and I like the word that I like, there's values, right? We have to have clear values. What is it that we value as an institution? What are our values? And how do those values, how do we bring them into our departments? How do we bring them into our Senate, which is like a critically important body, right? The faculty Senate is just has such a profound impact on the culture of a campus and students' experiences, and ultimately what a campus can actually achieve. Classroom, obviously, college division and so forth. And so I like that as a starting point. How do you handle behaviors that contradict those professed values? It's going to happen. It's going to happen, right? I think it's helpful to remind folks sometimes, and to try to do it in a way. The challenge with that is when Frank says something that's not aligned with the values that we've all kind of committed to, right? Are you able to call me out or call me in, however you want to describe it, in a way that allows me to understand and be held accountable, and even more so to assume accountability, right? And that still allows us to move forward in our relationship as colleagues. Like, that's really hard to do sometimes, right? I say something that's in violation of a norm or a value. Art calls me out. I'm already feeling a sense of embarrassment or shame, right? And sometimes that embarrassment and that shame could actually be a barrier to me doing what I should do, which is to, say, hey, you know what, I screwed up. And, I apologize for that. And moving forward, I'm gonna work hard to be better and do better. And so, those are tricky. There's always interpersonal dynamics that come into play. What's my relationship with Art? Right. Obviously, if we have rapport, we have a relationship, it's a little bit easier than if I don't know Art. Right. And so all of that comes into play. But I think ultimately the one thing that I think we all have to commit to is being open to feedback. I don't even want to call it criticism, but feedback that is constructive and is only meant to help us and support us. Not things that are looking to shame and embarrass us, right? Because that's not, feedback that is given to us in good faith is probably the best way to describe it, and I think if we all can commit to that, and we can all acknowledge that we're all imperfect, regardless of how long we've been doing what we've been doing, and how much, it's why I get nervous when people call me an expert, right? Because even experts mess up sometimes, right? Michael Jordan missed shots, didn't make every shot. And so if we can commit to just lean into our imperfection and be okay with that with ourselves, and actually be okay with that with each other, then I think that could take us pretty far at times. As simple as that sounds, right? It's easy to say, hard to do, of course, but we got to commit to practicing that and modeling that also.
I came up to ask a question, but then I see that Anna has a hand. So please go ahead, Anna, and then I'll see if my question's still relevant.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Kim. Dr. Harris, could you, so I think the word civility is a contentious word when we aren't clear about how that's being used. And then also being aware of the way that some of this kind of feedback loop is racialized can be super important. And I think considering that we have a lot of new senators with a variety of backgrounds and things, could you just speak a little bit to kind of how we navigate that space in a way that is acknowledging the power dynamics that are present and that aren't basically shutting down people that are dissenting because we don't like what they're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Anna. Great question. Civility is another word I don't really use because again, I think it, not to say that you shouldn't, but there needs to be a shared understanding of what it is. It sounds to me though that what it's kind of gets at the heart of is how are we going to communicate, right? Speak to each other, even our nonverbals towards each other. How are we going to be able to engage in respectful and collegial interpersonal dialogue, right? That might include some disagreement, that might include, some tense conversations at time. And, I think the whole concept of this, we live in a racially salient society, right? And so I am full aware, for example, that what I say and how I show up to folks sometimes is going to be mediated, and at times it's going to be filtered through the fact, I'm a 6 foot 200 pound Black guy with cornrows. And that means that image means something, and it denotes certain things to certain people. And so, I think first and foremost is sort of recognizing and understanding, me personally understanding what that is, not to say that I have to disarm people, but I think it's sort of saying, hey, listen, what I say and how it's received might be received differently from someone who says the same exact thing, but they look different, right? Or they speak different, right? I don't speak with an accent, someone does, right? And so I think just being clear about that is the reality that we're living in, and everybody making a commitment. Again, this is about not pretending that you're perfect. We are all susceptible to implicit and explicit bias. And I think we all have to commit to growing and acknowledging and being better in that regard. And again, right, when we make a mistake, or when someone says, hey, I feel some kind of way about the way you responded to me, that we don't race like each other, right? We don't get defensive. We don't try to put the blame on the person who's been, the victim in that situation. But the only way that works is if we can create a space where there's empathy and grace, right? And the way that I like to think about it also is I try, and again, I'm not always perfect at this, but I try to extend to folks the same empathy and grace that I would want extended to me, because eventually I'm going to screw up too. Right. And when I screw up, I hope that folks will respond to me in a way that gives me, some opportunity to address it and to get better. Now, at the same time, I can't keep making the same mistake, right? I can't keep saying and doing the same thing over and over, because then it's not a mistake. Then it's, that seems to be more of an intentional choice. But I think that, that's kind of what civility means to me in a lot of ways. And obviously the basic things, we don't yell at each other. We don't throw things at each other, right? We try really hard not to take what happens in a meeting, take it outside of a meeting and use it to slander and backstab, right? I mean, I'm not saying that that's what happens at your institution. I'm actually thinking about some of the things that often happen here at my own institution. But and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but I hope I responded to your question in a way that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it was helpful. And it made me think about how necessary creating space for folks to build trust and to be trustworthy of that trust. And then also the necessity for relationship building, because it's hard to offer, some of those concepts, especially when you said like folks keep doing the same thing. And so it's hard to be gracious when you keep getting smacked in the face over and over.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, what is trust? How do we build trust? Consistency over time is trust, right? I mean, that's how we get at trust. When you can, we can engage respectfully, and you could, treat me well, on a consistent basis and over a longer period of time, right? That's where we start to get trust. So every time trust is broken or perceived to be broken, it sets us back, right? We're back to square one.
Yeah.
And that's in any relationship. That's not just in relationships with colleagues. That's in the relationships you have with your students. It may be, those of you who are parents or, you're the offspring. I mean, any relationships are built on trust, and trust comes with consistency over time. I don't know how large this group is. It looks like it's a fairly large group, but I think it might be helpful, before you really roll up your sleeves and start to really dig into the details of the work that maybe you do a retreat and you take the time to learn some things about each other. Sometimes we make assumptions about each other. We make assumptions about someone's background and so forth. And that's where you can start to lay a foundation for a relationship to form. And again, that's assuming you're starting at square one, right? Art and I are just now meeting for the first time. That's not taking into account any history or anything that may have happened before, because that obviously complicates things. But I'm just, sort of speaking from an outsider perspective who doesn't know anything about anyone's interpersonal relationship with each other, with how I would try to go about it.
Thank you. I think thank you. I want to reflect more on that question and think about that trust building. I know getting to sort of talk in person and learn more about each other is so important. So this is a question, I'm new to the Senate now, and I know we have new senators as well. And in your opening remarks, you mentioned that you've been, for the last few months, talking to some leadership in the Senate about the important role Senate can play as the institution tries to change and move forward and recover from so many things, but also like support each other as we are trying to discover new ways to truly embody equity in our classrooms, how we talk to each other. It is an exciting time. I'm wondering if there's anything that you could share from those discussions about what you see as the Senate's role and how to, obviously the people on the Senate, but to engage with faculty as a whole. Like, I just wondering if there's been some concepts or ideas that you've been exploring that would be appropriate to share with us as we start this year, so that we can try to continue and reflect on those ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that there's been anything, specific. My thoughts are, you got to have a set of priorities, right? So we've spent the last, I can't believe, 20 minutes talking about relationships and, how do we engage with each other? And that's important. But what's equally important is that you have a set of priorities, things that you want to accomplish in this academic year, right? That when it's all said and done, when we get to commencement, and commencement seems like it's a long time from now. We all know these academic years are like dog years; they go by so fast, right? So we got about 9 months. So what do we want to achieve in 9 months? My advice is you keep it simple, 3, no more than 3, but 3 things that could have a real impact. 3 things that could really move not only the Senate forward, but move the college forward. 3 things that are really aligned with the college's priorities and the community's priorities. Enrollment should be one of the 3. I'm gonna just say it, and then, and why is that important? You all are the faculty leadership of the college, which is an incredibly important role, but it also comes with an incredible amount of responsibility. And so the priorities that you establish can have an impact on hiring, can have an impact on the college's, budget and expenditures, can have an impact on, how the college engages its community, and I kind of started with this, and this has kind of been my own personal theme that I brought into the year. We have important work to do. As educators, we have important work to do. We don't have time to waste. We have folks that are counting on us. We are, despite the challenges that we've had to work through, despite the incredible constraints we felt around our capacity and trying to do our work in the Zoomosphere, I'll call it, we still hold positions of privilege, right? We still can make a difference. But that only happens if we're kind of rowing in the same direction. And so I don't like to use the word advice, right? But
Go ahead, use it.
my 2 cents would be have some very clear priorities that you can all agree on, right? And when things are when you're feeling overwhelmed, or when you feel like, wow, we got to get back to center, those priorities are what bring you back to center. Just like the values are what bring you back to center in terms of relationships. Priorities bring you back to center in terms of the work that you do and how you go about doing it. So I would just be crystal clear on that. I wouldn't do more than 3 because, I'd rather see, I think, deep progress on fewer things is better than shallow progress on a lot of things.
So I want to thank you. I want to jump in, and I don't know if we can do this today at the retreat with the time we have left, but I'm also a new department chair. So I'm learning more about
that is the hardest job on campus. Yeah.
And so I'm learning more about how some students are, suffering in their classes because of things the faculty members are doing.
Right.
We have so much, especially full-time tenured, but our, adjunct faculty, we have great rehire practices. So there's really very little you can do when a faculty member is doing hurtful things in some ways. So I guess I'm thinking, could a priority be, and again, we can obviously talk about this later, but I'm just brainstorming now in this chance of kind of openness and starting our year. And as I feel saddened when I hear these things, that there could be some way to kind of track the things that we do that really pain our students. And they can be things that we're just not always aware of. I know there's things that, because of things like biases and, my embodied as a white older woman, I can trigger things for people. That's one category. But I'm thinking more like somebody gets a 0 on an assignment and they don't know it for some reason because of how you set up your class. They find out much later that they didn't pass. I mean, I just feel like, or, the teacher didn't ever answer an email or didn't said, just follow the directions. Well, I know how hard it is to follow directions. I'm like reading stuff on how to Zoom and how to follow the Brown Act. I'm like, damn, am I doing this? It's hard to follow directions. So I guess I'm just thinking, can we take this time to sort of just share what especially supports our students? And I know we're doing so much of this with the amazing equity trainings we've had, the summer online culturally responsive pedagogy. I do believe the needle is shifting to that committed small enough group that the institution's practices will change, but I still hear things like, well, that's late, you missed the deadline, or, oh, you didn't read directions. I'm like, what? We don't expect to be treated that way when we screw up. Why do we get to treat our students that way? So I guess for me, as I think of our priorities, that is one for me that I would really love to highlight and heighten. What can faculty do to treat the students the way we want to be treated? And I think we forget that. So I don't know, just throw that out there.
Yeah, of course. That gets at values, right? And so that has to be part of the conversation around values. But also those are, come on, y'all, most of us has been teaching long enough to know, right? Giving timely feedback is that's faculty 101, right? Giving feedback that's constructive, that allows students to, not feel like crap, but feel like, okay, I recognize and understand I need to get better. And these are the things that I can do to get better. I'm gonna just say this, tell everybody, treat every student like you would want one of your family members, your kid, your, sibling, your neighbor's kid to be treated if they were a student at, at your college, right? I mean, that
That would cover a lot of bases right there. That would take care of it.
absolutely, right?
Uh-huh.
It's like, yeah, okay, Frank bombed his exam. This was not good work. I got to communicate that to Frank. Now, how can I communicate that to Frank in a way that allows Frank to say, hey, this is not going to cut it, but also give him a sense of empowerment to actually do some things that could help him improve, right? Share resources, maybe offer, if you can, to be able to look at some earlier drafts of the work, right? I mean, this is stuff that we probably know, have learned, and maybe even have practiced. And I think sometimes the last 2 years with the Zoom, and Art, I acknowledge your comment about, Zoom and how that has really, in some ways, eroded relationships. And some of our classes are completely asynchronous, so we don't even know who's on the other side of the computer. But, let's make sure we all have some basic tools and basic things. I shouldn't say basic, right? Because that kind of belittles it. That we have some tools and some ideas and strategies that we can use to say, okay, you don't need to go to a training for this, but here are 10 things that you should really, really focus on, right? As we transition into the fall term, that could really make a difference in your students. 5 of these things are going to be focused on, course design, feedback, and the other 5 things are going to be focused exclusively on the relationships that we have and sustain with students, right? Sometimes we assume that our colleagues, and I know what it's like to be an adjunct. You're the only, when you're there, the parking lot's empty, all the lights are off. You feel like you're the only one on campus, you and your students, right? So I know that could feel a little lonely. So maybe doing some direct and intentional outreach to our part-time and adjunct, and not just in the beginning of the year. Do you have your classroom? Do you have your roster? But mid-semester and even, towards the end, have somebody. It doesn't always have to be the department chair. It could be, some other colleagues to say, okay, I'm gonna, we have 10 adjuncts. We're gonna make sure everybody has at least one person, one of our full-time faculty who's gonna, not coach them, but kind of be a liaison, so to speak. Sometimes this happens, and I recognize it with myself, right? Sometimes I could have an incredibly stressful day at work, and I go home and the house is a mess. And the way that I respond to that is not always, proportionate to the right, right? And sometimes I don't even recognize that that's what I'm doing. And so, we gotta have reminders. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling again, but I think there's some basic things. I'm going to share after this. I'll share a webinar that we did right as the pandemic was happening. So it's a little bit dated. It's a couple years old, but there's some good reminders in there that you can share to say, okay, here's some things we can do that, they're very practical, that could help us kind of keep us in a space where, where we are bringing the best of ourselves in a way that helps to maximize our students' potential.
Yeah. A lot of different ways to do that. It's individual, but we can always keep that principle in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Do we have other questions in the room? Do we have other questions online? Do want to say that you are talking to us we are on our retreat. And the irony, of course, is that some of us are not able to retreat. And I know that some of us are on vacation and taking time to do this, but I'm just going to turn the screen around so you can see that, okay, people do your thing.
Yeah, that looks like a beautiful space. I love all the natural light in there,
We're at the Santa Barbara Zoo. And so
Oh, got it.
so far, no one has made the inevitable snarky comment about us being at the zoo, but we're at the zoo. It's a beautiful space with perhaps not maximum Zoom capabilities. But I would love to hear from people what's striking you, what kinds of questions do you have? Yeah.
Yeah, Art just reminded us of what we used to be able to do. I would say in addition to this, if there are opportunities to really elevate students' voices in a way that they feel safe doing it, and that could also be a good opportunity for learning as well. Like if you ask students what exactly a question, what facilitates your success in class, right? What are some things that faculty do that really allows you to learn? You get some, you can get some very, very good thoughts and very good ideas. And sometimes it's stuff that it's low hanging fruit, things that we don't even think about. It's like, yeah, I could easily do that, but I never realized that was so important for students, right? And so I would add that to the list of things that we might think about doing.
Yeah. Okay, come on up. Jeff Estrada has a question. He's coming
Yep.
up. Well, wait, they're not gonna hear anything you say.
Sorry, it's not a question, more of a, I don't know exactly what your wording was. And it's kind of like you said, the irony of us being in a retreat or whatever, but I just, I guess in short, we, as a senator, I don't actually know all of our senators. I don't know what departments they're all in. I literally know nothing about most of you or in the room or on Zoom. And I don't personally like that. I'm not saying we should be friends. I just want to know who I'm working with. And I think it will allow me to actually work or get more done. I think it'll allow all of us to get more done. It was personally kind of weird for me to vote for a vice president. We had two, I only knew one of them. And it's nothing against, was it Chris? I just don't know Chris, and I can't put confidence in that vote. I do know Tara, and I know she does great work. And so I don't think we could have gone wrong with either direction, but I think in the future, we can make better decisions if we know who we're working with. I'm not sure if everybody agrees with that, but that was just my feeling, my thought. I know I will work better if I know everybody. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Judge. I can respect that. My question.
I'm not walking away. I was still there.
No. If you could stay, it'd be great. Yeah. Sometimes this is kind of, in some ways, this is our profession, but it could be deeply personal at times, right? We put our heart and soul into what we do. And so my question for you is, maybe you can offer some strategy, some way that you think might facilitate relationship building with the entire Senate, right? If that means, hey, the next assignment, everybody has to record a 2-minute video about themselves that tells us something about yourself that has nothing to do with the fact that you are a professor at Santa Barbara City College, right? Are there sporting events? Are there things that, social gatherings, bowling? I mean, I know it's kind of hard sometimes with, half of us are Zoom and, that sort of thing. So maybe you have some online stuff, but also you have some in-person opportunities. Those things have to be intentional. They don't just happen. And they really don't just happen in the current context, right? And so I don't know if the Senate has a, relationship building task force or ad hoc committee or something, but maybe there's a handful of colleagues that might be able to take that on as, a responsibility. I kind of help. It pains me to say more responsibility, right? But they might be able to kind of do something to help create that and build that.
Yeah.
And those relationships, that's what's going to get you through the challenging times. right? That's what's going to get you over the hump when process or things appear to be breaking down, you know. Remember, right? Consistency over time. You know, it doesn't just happen. It takes some intentional effort, and it takes intentional efforts, right? It has to occur more than once and over a period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, of
Hopefully
course.
I'll see some of you or all of you at the barbecue.
That
There's one
sounds
tomorrow.
good.
Or it's not a barbecue, I was told. We're not allowed to food. There'll be food. That's all we do. All right, thanks.
Oh, wait. Just come up. That was the feedback bit. Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I thought of that.
No, I just had a question about getting back to the item before about helping students the best way. I teach non-credit adult high school GED, and occasionally I get students coming back to my class or wanting extra help. And sometimes they give me feedback about their experiences at the credit campus. And I think that I'm not sure how to give the what to do with that feedback. I think it'd be valuable. So just to give a little example, I have a student who was taking a class, and the professor, I think, trying to be maybe encouraging, said like, instead of saying like, do your best, or, said like, I don't want to see any garbage for you. And I don't know, like now that student's like terrified to turn anything in or to go to office hours, because like, oh my gosh, what if she thinks it's, garbage, and I don't know what to do. I feel like I should know this. So what I guess I don't want to like violate the student's trust in telling me. I also don't want to, tattle. Like what would be the best way to provide feedback to somebody I think who might be open for it?
Good question. What I really appreciate, I'm sorry, your name?
Trisha Matone.
Trisha, yeah. So what I really appreciate about your question, in part, my partner is the president of a non-credit community college down here in San Diego. So I have mad love and mad respect for what happens in non-credit programs. How difficult would it be? Let's say I was the professor that said that, right? And reflecting back on, over 16 years, I might have said something that wasn't too far away from what this professor said, right? How comfortable would you be just reaching out directly to him and saying, hey, Frank, I just want to share some feedback with you. This is coming from a good collegial place, but, you do have some students who are concerned about the quality of their work and really, feeling a little bit of a, concern about confidence because of a comment that you said, right? And I know it's just something, that you didn't mean it in the way that it was received, but is there anything maybe you can kind of reinforce to your students that, you want their best effort, you want them to, it's not about garbage, but give them your best work and that you're there to support them. Maybe that would, if you have a relationship with the faculty member.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's the problem. So I was thinking, and then also like, for example, as you were talking about this, that student's comment popped in my mind, and, I know Kim. And I feel comfortable with her that she wouldn't be, because I think it was in the English department, right? So that comment. So, like I might feel comfortable saying, you know what, there's some of your adjunct professors maybe, and actually, I don't even know if I know this professor's name. I mean, I could find it, there's a way if I wanted to search. But just, or maybe just something like a general awareness of how the words we choose or the way we phrase it from a negative point of view rather than a positive or encouraging point of view could affect students. Like that I feel comfortable with because I know Kim, but I don't know if I'm comfortable going to another department because I don't know if that department chair might be like, who was it?
Yeah.
And like, we're not going to hire that.
Or it might be that department.
Yeah, but we're not, yeah. But you got to set it up. Like, listen, I'm not going to tell you who it was. Right. But
well, I don't even know.
Right. Because it's not about singling anybody out. You need to reinforce this at the departmental level that we got to be concerned about the language that we use.
Mhm.
Right. Even when we're not intending to be, negative or pejorative, we got to understand where, where our students with some of their past experiences in education may have been, right? And so I think you just,
And that's another
you know,
issue. too.
yeah.
We're saying that some people would be like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was coming across that way. And other people are like, well, nope, that's the real world.
Right,
They're going to have to, they're not, when they're in their job, they're not going to be able to turn in, garbage stuff. And, and so I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends that would be that the person, how receptive are they, to hearing it. So, but yeah, that's a good idea. Thanks.
In the effort to have discussion via Zoom, I came up to, the English department is starting a new peer tutor mentor project. And so students are going to be coming in and they're going to be telling us stuff about what's making the class difficult for them. So Trisha's comment made me think perhaps the Senate could just gather student comments about things they especially liked and
Okay.
things that were hard for them.
I want to ask, I
Like
also
the
get a
like-
lot of good feedback
Right,
from.
right.
guys
So
too.
you would share, right. So just so she gets the good too. So we would just try to amplify those student voices, protecting anonymity of students and classes. But if we just started to bring that to the fore, I think it would encourage all faculty to reflect a little more. So that could be one of our priorities this year, amplify student voices. So of course, the academic counselors got extra, possibilities in that category because you're going to hear
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
So what about trying that for a year? Just, I don't know.
And I also, just one little thing before you go, is that I think that would be important, but I think you really got to build the trust with the students and the faculty ahead of time that this is truly to improve education, not well, because it's like snitching, it feels like, right? And so how can you, it's not, but for some people, it might feel like you're telling on somebody or it's like, oh, I don't want to cause problems or open a can of worms or something. So how do you have to build that ahead of time, I just want to say.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go sit down.
Yeah, I mean, this is all, all good thoughts. I acknowledge your point here also that we got to separate the sort of casual one-offs from somebody, right? When we see a pattern of someone who's consistently being, I want to be careful about the words I use here, right? A pattern of negative behavior towards students. We have to be able to separate what I think we're talking about from those situations, because in the latter, we do have some responsibility, particularly if we're in a leadership position, a dean or a department chair, we have some responsibility to intervene and address it, right? When we're getting, formal complaints and things like that from students on a consistent basis. So that's, sitting those issues notwithstanding. Does the Senate have an active social media account that all faculty are encouraged to follow? Twitter, Instagram, something like that?
The previous president had a Twitter account, which was used occasionally. Our new Senate assistant, Margarita, and I are working on completely revamping our website so that it's more interactive and more useful. But but one of the things that I've thought about for a long time is that there should be some sort of maybe an Instagram account, something that's visual as well as language. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I like Instagram. I like Twitter. But I was thinking you can use it to offer tips, strategies, useful advice, things to keep in mind, right? Hey, faculty, we're approaching midterms. It's a very stressful time for students. Do some outreach. When students may be coming to you, needing more support.
Yeah.
Consider that. Here's some useful resources, right? And so thinking about messaging and how can you be strategic in your messaging that is done in the name of outreach to your faculty, right? And using that, again, that doesn't solve every problem. If somebody is, that's not going to help somebody who's just, dead set on just being, angry and difficult or whatever it may be, right? That's a different situation. But I'm really thinking about, 80%, I feel like 80% of us try to, maybe even more than that. I like to believe, and I might be naive here. I need to believe that most of us and our colleagues don't wake up every day saying, hey, how can I make things more difficult for my students? And take the trek to campus or log on and say, I'm here to just be a pain in the ass and just make it hard for everyone. I don't feel like that's what most of us endeavor to do. Right? And so what are the ways that we can help facilitate and make each other's job easier? And a lot of times that comes down to tools and resources and information, not exclusively. Relationships are a part of that too, right? But how can we be strategic in getting the right messages out to the right people at the right time? In the end, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, the Senate can, you're already a leading voice in the context, in the campus. And so helping folks know, hey, follow us on Instagram. We're going to be sharing tips, advice, right? We might be able to, amplify, share some things that we hear from students without saying who the students is, right? Really trying to be strategic and trying to be, using it in a way that addresses a need, right? What do folks need right now? And how can we provide it? And that's not the only thing you do, but that's one way that you engage.
I think it's a really interesting point about need, and I'm looking at the senators online and I'm looking at the senators in the room. And so one of the things that you may just truly hate this idea. So let me know if you do, but I would almost love to do the Instagram idea and do an Instagram takeover. So, the business division is taking over for this week.
Oh, that's nice. I like
right?
that.
And automotive is taking over for this week. And here's stuff that people individually within the major might need to know, but here's how it rolls out to something larger. It goes to Jess's point about building relationships, and who knows, maybe only the senators watch it, but it's also maybe something really useful. Like I love going to see, I live in just a plain basic classroom, because nothing, language can happen anywhere, writing can happen anywhere, but I walk across other parts of campus and it's like, ooh, it's cool stuff in my classroom. Like, ooh, what are those guys doing over there, right? Jess gets to blow up stuff, right? Jess is in chemistry. I think that's interesting. We can talk about that as a Senate, but the more I listen to this, and we can talk about this in a moment. I don't want to take up our time with Dr. Harris, but I think we're going to have to go at this from multiple perspectives, right? And that we allow ourselves to re-engage, because what we're really learning this year, I hope, and I think it's great so many of us showed up in person, is rebuilding what it is to be a Senate in person, to rebuild those relationships. And that previous Senates have done astonishing work, right? They protected us with vaccine mandates, with Delta, done amazing work, but online and in a way that that people aren't supposed to be. And super fast. My second husband, long pause there. My second husband was a philosophy professor, which should get a longer pause. And we were at the Birmingham Zoo.
Oh,
We're at the Birmingham Zoo. I was teaching at Mississippi State University at that point. And we go to the Birmingham Zoo. It's our first time there. Our daughter is little. And there's this huge building and it says social animals. And he's like, I don't want to go to that building. So we of course go over to that building. It's filled with primates, which of course is what we are, right? And at the very end, there's a mirror, right? And that's what we are, because the Birmingham Zoo is like social animals. That's us. And so I just feel like we're back into, being social animals. And what does that look like? How do we reconnect with that when we've got this amazing tech?
Yeah.
Anyway, other thoughts from anyone from the online group? Any questions or anything that's coming up for you? No, anyone in person? Anyone else in person? Ben, you're looking thoughtful over there. Reflecting. Yeah. Elizabeth, no? All right, well, I know you've got a ton of meetings today. Thank you for squeezing us in. I think, are you dashing across campus now?
Yeah, this is, when I got up this morning and looked at what I had to do today, this was like one of the few things I was excited to do. So thank you for this. This is what I love to do. and I hope this isn't the last time we get to connect. I'm here for you as a resource, be there as a resource for each other, and just commit to making this the best year in a long time, right? We all need it, our students need it. Make sure you're prioritizing self-care. We didn't talk about that today, but that should be a part of, your work as a Senate. Maybe that's one of your priorities as well, is, making sure that there's solid self-care, because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
You can't, right? And we can't afford to lose any, we need all hands on deck. And, every person we lose sets us back. And so we need folks to be able to sustain themselves. So thank you. I appreciate you all. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'd love to have you in person.
Of course. Getting me to Santa Barbara, that's
Difficult.
you don't hear it all the time, right? It's like everybody wants to come to Santa Barbara, of course.
Yeah, because San Diego is such an unattractive place.
San Diego's all right too. I'll give you that. All
Okay,
right.
thank you
Thank
so
you all.
much. All right.
Appreciate you. Yeah.
Okay, so for the senators who are here, let's take maybe a 7-minute break. Does that sound good? Stretch, get up, eat, whatever you want. Right? So we're absolutely dead on time. So let's take just a few minutes, okay? All right, we'll be back. Bathroom break, whatever you need. So get in a line for the bathroom. Okay, everyone, hello, we're back. We're back-ish. I think a few people, we're missing a few people. It looks like we're missing a few people online too. There we go, there's Ellen. Ellen, I don't know what has happened, but at least I can see your hand this time. Do you remember the last meeting? I had no idea where you was forever missing your hand, so
Oh.
glad to be able to see your hand, your raised virtual hand. Yeah. So question to everyone on Zoom, and most of us are back, not everyone is back. Do you like that idea, Frank Harris's idea of doing an Instagram? Okay, so Joy's saying she's not that into it. Okay, well, you wouldn't look. Okay. Okay, all right. Brittany. Yeah.
Just a reminder that we can't hear.
I know, she was still talking, so now I'm going to summarize what she said. Okay, so tell me if I've got this right. So what, yeah, so actually we're just going to have Brittany come up.
So when I ask students about like what platform they like Instagram because of the pictures, you know, we should probably try to mirror what they like. Not everyone's going to do it, which is totally fine because we still have the emails that go all campus when stuff like that has to get explained. But if students look at like the Instagram and they see, you know, what's being communicated to like faculty, it might make it easier for them to understand like what communication we get. Because sometimes during the semester, I'll get somebody that says, oh, we heard about this through, you know, the platform. And I'm like, well, I did not hear about it. Like when one of the CARES Act came up, they're the ones who said it. So I also like Melanie's idea, like with the different departments, because in other places that I've been in, nobody knows what's going on like around campus. So like if departments were to pretty much like promote what they're doing, it would make it easier for the entire campus. Maybe they can't come visit, but they kind of know what's going on in other places. Like I went to the art department at the end of the last semester, and I went to go look to see like what was going on there. And I'm like, this fits perfectly with what the automotive students are asking me. They want to learn a little bit more about welding and stuff. And he was saying his enrollment's low. So it's like, he's like, we can collaborate and do something together. And it's like, you know, if you don't have that conversation, you don't know what's going on in another department, it really makes like silos on the campus, which what we're trying to disrupt. So.
Love that idea. I mean, we could certainly start that I could start, you know, before school begins, and we could do an Instagram poll. You know, you can put it in stories, an Instagram poll. Who has the coolest classroom? I mean, automotive is probably going to win. Chemistry might come up. Kim, we're going down 100% for sure. We're the losers. I don't know, Ellen, you've got cool stuff over there in the library, but maybe we do something like that. And you know, and some people won't look at it, and that's 100% fine, but maybe some people will. But it might also be useful for us, you know, and then we do the takeover maybe. So I think if you guys are willing, a few of you are willing to participate, not obviously not everybody has to, but if some of you are willing to participate, I think it's maybe worth a try. There's some really interesting things that are going on in teaching with using Instagram pages as a form of teaching too. So, all right. Other thoughts, other reactions to what Professor Harris said. Ben, come on up. Yeah, I know. Ben is slowly ambling forward.
I was just gonna say that I was gonna comment that the school already has an Instagram page. And if we're gonna start one, we should really focus on the audience Is it just faculty or students? So if we have like what you suggested, a takeover, that's more, I believe, for students, right? And I think that's what SBC's main account should be doing, not necessarily us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Trisha, are you ready?
I would say, like, I agree with you about like it being for students, but I think that especially coming from non-credit, I know when I used to go to kickoffs, I would sit next to someone at lunch and I would talk about our program. And sometimes it was with a counselor, sometimes with another person in the department. They go like, oh, I had no idea you guys do that, or that you have that, you know, our students are going to become your students. Some of them will. And all, you know, so I feel like it is also for faculty to know about our different areas as well for the Instagram. So that's what I was thinking, this, because we've been talking about how can we get more awareness of what non-credit really, I think people have different ideas of what it is, and because it's many different things. So I was thinking more from a faculty perspective, but yeah, you're right. But keeping in mind that students are also looking at it as well.
All right, I don't feel like it's an either or. What I get a lot from students is, you know, we see you and we hear you for hours a day, but we don't know you. If you just share, you know, even a tidbit of what's personal. So I feel like we could do both. That when I was at the high school, it would be your favorite book and why, your favorite activity and why, and literally it would take you 2 minutes of sharing, but that's enough for, I think, faculty to be able to, you know, plug in and get an idea of who we are and what's going on. And the same for students, those that are interested and want to know something.
So that goes to, that's an interesting point, Russell. Thank you for that. So that goes to two things, right? One, this question that Jess had about building more rapport among the senators. We could easily do that in the beginning of Senate meetings. And then two, maybe that's also something that we do if we do this faculty focused and yet recognizing students might look at it page. You know, how did you guys get interested in automotive? You know, but or whatever it is that you want to talk about. I thought it was an interesting challenge that that Dr. Harris gave to us to have 2 minutes that does not say something about school, right? Which I think for us is like name, rank, and serial number, right? I'm a this in this department. I've been here this many years, right? That's it. That's all you need to know. So, all right. Any other thoughts as we move in? So where we're going next, I have a series of slides. One of the questions, one of the other things that we talked about and steering to do here is to give you guys some answer some questions and so on. So these are slides. I went and I looked at a lot of other Senate pages. It's one of the things that Margarita and I are doing is looking at a number of different academic senates across the state. So if you have one that you love, let us know. How are they designing their web pages? What are they doing? What can we pull from them instead of always, you know, starting from the beginning? I know this is something that Tara feels strongly about too, right? ASCCC has the Academic Senate of California Community Colleges has some amazing resources. So anything else before I start? The PowerPoint. And you know what? I just need you guys to know, usually for my classes, my PowerPoints are more attractive than this, but we have the goddess of PowerPoints here with us. Tara Carter. Tara's doing like, oh, me? Wait, Oscar coming to me? I had no idea. But so mine are as plain as Tara's are. Beautiful. Okay. All right. Are we good? Move on. All right. So. All right. They are not attached to our agenda. I will absolutely attach them. Yeah, I was still working on them. So yeah. All right. So Academic Senate best practices. Why is this showing everything on the bottom? It's what? Oh, you don't? Okay. No. Oh, interesting. All right. Thank you. So here we go. Best practices. Again, please leap in here. And, you know, some of you don't know me. So I've been at City College. I think this is my 21st year, which is just completely astonishing. I've been on academic senates. I've been on our academic senate twice. I was on, when I was at Cal State Northridge, I was on their academic senate. And when I moved to Mississippi State University, I was their first academic senate president. So I've done this in different places before. That said, maybe those are a lot of bad lessons to unlearn, so we'll see, right? But just so you know a little bit about my academic senate experience. All right, so one of you asked on your questions like 10+1, that's what we do. Let's ground ourselves in 10+1. This is the charge of the academic senate. One of the really interesting things about California in the 1980s was the way it handed over a massive amount of power in the community colleges to the faculty. And part of that is with shared governance. And so what we've got here is sort of the keystone known as 10+1. Cornelia is out right now, but the +1, for instance, let me give you a concrete example. It says other academic and professional matters as are mutually agreed upon between governing board and the academic senate, but that also allows us to work with the FA, for instance, on evaluation and so on. We've got to pause.
Zoom are not seeing what we see on the screen. So I think if you just stop the presentation mode and it's not as pretty,
Where?
just stop presenting. Yeah, and you're just gonna have to like share your screen. Just make it wider here.
All right. Shouldn't that? Okay, we'll just go that. How's that?
Unfortunately, because it's a dual monitor.
Okay,
Can
is
you
that
check?
better? Can you guys all see the 10+1 now? Juan, can you see that?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Juan. Okay, so so here are our ones, and what I would like is if anyone can think of a concrete example. So let's go to that desire for concrete examples, a concrete example of what each of those are that we have done that would be useful. Can we do that? And so not just me. So the first one, and Tara does not get to answer this one, curriculum, including establishing prerequisites and placing courses within disciplines. So Kathy O'Connor is saying curriculum committee every time we review courses. Yes, absolutely. So reviewing discipline assignments for every course, reviewing prerequisites and co-requisites. That's a separate approval process to approve the course that we also have to. Okay, so separate process, approve the course and approve the pre or co-requisites. Okay, thank you. All right, how about degree and certificate requirements?
Remember last year, didn't we do something for incarceration?
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah, so Joy said, didn't we do something last year for incarcerated students? And we did. We did create a pathway for them. And that was actually correspondence courses, right? That was about correspondence courses. Would that count here, do we think? Yeah, so it goes back and forth, right? And I think that's why I want to sort of talk through these, is because there's a lot of crossover from one to the other. And I think Brittany used the word silos. It's a word you're going to hear me use on Friday, but sometimes I think it's also that different groups have to work on the same thing, or you come at it from a different perspective. You're still working in concert on student success, for instance, but in different ways. Okay, grading policies. I think we can all we all know concrete examples of grading policies. Yes, Kim?
Decades ago when I came, it might have been, I don't remember when, but we finally went to plus minus grade and we decided to have a choice.
Yeah.
But that went through the Senate, took a long time. That was a good example.
Yeah, plus minus grading policy went through the Senate.
I just want to jump in with a reminder that we can't, those of us online can't hear what's going on in the room.
Right.
So
And that's
unless
why I'm I'm trying to summarize that. And you know, am I not clear?
it's not, I mean, it seems like we're missing some of what's being said.
If there's a gap, I'm just letting the person speak and then I'm trying to say that. But I think we'll try and have people come back up for the examples. Can we do that? And that way we can speak to Ellen's point. And Ellen, I
Thank
know
you. I appreciate that. It's just I'm wanting everyone to feel equally a part of the meeting, regardless of which modality we're attending in.
right, absolutely. And thank you for being persistent in that, and apologies for that. Okay, so grading policies, we had plus minus grading, ed program development. Anyone online have an example of ed program development? Or anyone in the room? Trisha is looking thoughtful, but still silent right now.
Clarify developing programs.
Yeah, and that's something that I've been looking into and trying to figure out. So I think it's a little unclear. Kathy, come on up. Kathy had a good question.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What was something that you're trying to figure out?
Kathy's coming up to answer to ask the question.
So I asked Melanie if this,
You have to make sure that they can see you.
if this referred to the development of programs and certificates, which I assume it did. And actually, this is a process that starts usually with each department. It also starts in our program review process, where we're supposed to be putting in what new programs or certificates that we would like to be adding. And then the departments work together. They work with the administration, the VP and the deans. And then when that program is finally developed, it comes through the curriculum process. It's put into CurricuNet. We have a new process now for developing programs, which has really been great, that Tara and Kayleen have developed. So, and then it goes through that process. Often also then these new programs can come to the Senate for review also, when there's maybe a new idea that we want to bring across. We want to get support from faculty. But ultimately the curriculum committee will approve these programs. They get sent then to the Board of Trustees for approval, and then they need to be approved by the state chancellor's office. Is that helpful or not?
Right, super helpful. Thank you so much, Kathy. Okay, how about 5 standards or policies regarding student preparation and success? So we have the chancellor's vision for success, right? That is a state mandated vision. We work within that framework. We can also come up with our own framework. I'm looking at Brittany. Any comments that you'd like to make, given that you're working on the student equity plan right now? And do you want to come up? You can say no, by the way, unless you. Yeah, here comes Brittany to answer that.
Thank you, Brittany. I think with the standards and policies regarding student preparation, I think that goes hand in hand with also kind of maybe what's going on in the classroom. and how we view like what students should be prepared for. So some of it is just kind of, I think more of like the faculty's maybe like understanding and creating student preparation and success. Some of that is just kind of like a lot of its sense of belonging in the classroom and building like relationships. So in the student equity plan that's getting written right now, a lot of where we're finding equity gaps is just because that's not actually happening in classrooms, and that you know, the student success actually relies upon the instructor teaching and also curriculum and how it's developed and what kind of equity is infused in it. So.
Thank you, Brittany, for that. And I'm just thinking, because you guys are nearly done with the student equity plan, so maybe there can be a presentation to the Senate about the new plan. Would love to get you guys on the agenda for that. Brittany's getting her workout today.
I'm getting my steps in. So with the student equity plan, just a little background. We got the student equity plan template from the chancellor's office during summer. It was probably the end of June. They went through one revision and we probably got those instructions mid-July. So we've had a core team and we've been inviting departments and large groups, department chairs and, you know, people that we need to have conversations with. So we're in the process of writing the plan. We're targeting our first draft to get shared to our student equity committee by the end of next week. And it's going to go to all the 4 major constituent groups for first and second reads. So that plan will get shared very shortly because we're on a super tight deadline. It's due November 30th. So to share, yes, yeah, to share it out and do everything. So that plan will be coming out, and it's very different than the other plans. And I think it's very good for the work that we're trying to do on campus.
Thanks, Brittany. That's exciting. Okay. So that brings us to 6. And I think we are doing 6 right now. Does that seem fair to people? Academic Senate counts as 6. 7, faculty roles and involvement in accreditation, including self-study and annual reports. Is there anyone on the Senate right now who's been involved in the last accreditation plan? No, interesting. But we know that there has been an accreditation plan, right? And we had certain things to work on, which we are still wrapping up and working on. Okay. So 8, policies for faculty professional development activities. Anyone want to speak to this one? Any concrete examples? Yes, Tara was just involved in one of those. I know.
Hi, everyone. So obviously our campus has continual professional development opportunities, and they often get presented to Senate ahead of time so that we can weigh in on it if that's where we want to allocate our resources. And so the professional development opportunity that Melanie was alluding to was we just completed another 3-day ally, and that's been a Senate supported program. So go us.
Thank you. And that's also sort of debuted some of the, at the Ally from the beginning of the summer, and in this one, the trauma responsive pedagogy, which you've received an email about. So, okay. So that brings us to 8, processes for program review. Anyone? No? PEC, yeah, PEC, has anyone been on PEC? No? Program Review Committee? Okay. Well, we do have to all do it, yeah, that's right, for program review. And I was on the Senate when they came up with the original version of PEC. And that was an that's just a super quick thing that I think is useful. the school was losing a ton of money, and there was great fear that what they were going to do is cut programs. And when I was at Mississippi State, they cut, they had a huge petroleum engineering program, and they cut the program and saved the school an astonishing amount of money. And so it, you know, we might be not used to it happening, but it happens. So what PEC was, or the original incarnation of it, was a way for faculty to be able to review what the administration is trying to do to the program. So it goes back to that spirit of shared governance, you know, that some administrator doesn't just get to say no, that it comes back to a governance committee. Okay, processes for institutional planning and budget development. Any acronyms that come to anybody's mind for this one? PNR. And one of you asked about acronyms. I have a slide. I have a slide for that. And I'll show you that slide. Actually, I'm going to jump out of order for that slide. And then the one, I gave you an example of the one, right? And other. So what does it take to enact some of these things? Okay, I know that that was long and drawn out, but I hope it helped, especially for new senators. What do we, you know, what do these things really mean? How do we enact those? Kim's coming up.
So this is stirring up a lot from my past life on the Senate. And I just wanted to share that something that was a real issue 2014-16, when I was Senate president, was the language of make recommendations. So sometimes we think it's just totally up to us, but we make recommendations and then the board often has to approve these recommendations. Usually they just do, like all the CAC stuff goes to the board. We're just recommending it. Now, thankfully, they usually don't jump in and try to change anything, but I just feel like it was useful for me to remember that it's, you know, it's not our final decision, but we build relationships and give background to support our decisions. And then hopefully the board, you know, supports them. And we are, you know, we come up against that with certain things. We're going to make recommendations about, say, keeping a vaccine mandate, but you know, who knows? We could technically say that can fit into 10+1. And then I also wanted to highlight they keep talking about policies and processes, and they're super important. They're sometimes can be sort of boring, or it's hard to like, how do you put it in writing so that we can follow these things so that we really can collaborate on them? And I think you guys have already been working, and now I'm joining and learning about this work, but I just served on a past hiring committee where we're trying to change the policy and practices and processes for how we're hiring. And so that is such powerful equity work. And I think the more we can think about policies and processes and how to change them to better support equity, that's really exciting part of our, you know, role here with this 10+1 highlight.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. Thanks for that. And that's a really important policy that we for sure are going to be talking about early on. So one of you said on your question, like, what is up with our acronyms? So I was in a new hire meeting. I just wanted to go see what the new hire meetings look like with Denatrix, and she, oh, come on. Really? It's not in presentation mode. Okay, let's see. Yeah, actually, that's a good idea. Let me just put that in the chat. So we'll go back here and drop this in the chat, maybe. All right, I'm just going to skip this because I don't want to take up too much time. Anyway, I will, all of this whole deck will be in the minutes. I'll also, it'll also be on our website. But you can go to HR and it's an entire list of every acronym on campus. Trisha is stunned. Her eyes are like, wait, there's such a thing. And what was funny was the other people who are not the new hires, but who've been here for forever were like, wait, there's such a thing. So there is such a thing. All right. So the roles and responsibilities of senators, some of you asked about this. Some of this is from Solano Community College. I adapted it for us. Obviously attend and vote. But when we were talking about what we wanted this meeting to be in steering, one of the things that really came up was this question of communication. And how do you communicate with your division? What happens if your division is kind of pulling back? Right? How do you get people engaged? And so at the end of this slide, and I think we have enough time, we'll move fairly quickly. At the end of this presentation, there's a slide saying what we'd like you to think about when you go for your division meetings. But the general feeling from steering, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, was that we also just need to ask your divisions, what is it they want to know? What kind of feedback from you as senator would be useful for them? Right? So that there's some sort of interaction. So that goes to this point about informing your division by providing a Senate report, right? And then, the useful point that if you're relying on minutes, those are going to be basically a month behind. So you probably don't want to rely on minutes too much. And then the other question that came up a lot on your questionnaire was, how do we represent the faculty? What happens if the faculty don't give feedback? What happens if you ask and no one says anything? Then how do you vote? Do you vote your own way? Do you vote, if you think your department or your division is going to be against something, do you do that? So I think one thing that you can also point out in the division meetings is how crucial it is, right? Were I a senator, I would say to the English division, you don't want Melanie's opinion. You want me to be representing your opinion. And so, if no one wants to get involved, maybe, you don't want my personal opinion might actually galvanize them to that. But I'd like to know from people who've been senators before or anyone, do you have any ideas about how we get our constituencies to be more involved? Jess, do you want to come up? Yeah. Okay. So Jess said, can you just say build relationships? Okay. And we've got Ellen.
Yeah, I know not all divisions do this, but ESD meets monthly. We've been doing it on Zoom. We used to do it in person, and we'll probably be deciding this Friday how we want to do that this year and going forward. But I find it really helpful. I just assumed that all divisions did that, and then I found out that some only meet during in-service. So I think there's different ways of communication, but I personally think that of course not everyone can make the particular meeting time, but that having some kind of real-time communication between meetings is helpful. And then I also just wanted to add something in terms of how we vote. There have been some things during the 2 years I've been on Senate so far that where ESD faculty in general are very affected by it and tend to have a very strong opinion one way or another. And there's other things where we'll ask for feedback, both in our meeting over email, we'll create a Google Doc, have your comments and questions here, and we'll get absolutely zero response. And that's not to criticize anyone in our division. It's just sometimes it doesn't necessarily apply as much to us, or people are busy with other things or whatever. And I do think that it's important for us, each of us as senators, to also understand that we're representing the faculty as a whole, and the issues under 10+1 and how they affect students as a whole. And so there are certain votes where, we've also been involved in more in-depth discussions and have a more intimate understanding of some topics than people in our divisions might. And so I think if we're going to go against the majority of our division in a vote, we need to have a good reason for that. But I think there can be times when that is possible or necessary. So I just wanted to say that, especially if it's something where the majority of our division has not expressed an opinion one way or another, and maybe a very small percentage express an opinion on one side of things, but there are strong arguments for actually voting the other way that affect the campus as a whole or something like that. So it just, it's not always black and white. There can be much more nuance to those decisions.
Yeah, I think that's so well put. And that in fact anticipated one of the questions that someone said, what if you want to vote in a different way than your division? Yeah, it is really the weight of representative government, right? So I think Ellen also brought up something that's really important, like doing your homework to whatever that counts as for you. What do you really need to know about this topic or this issue or so on? So yeah, really well put. And then I also think that if we come up against something this year that really strikes us as centrally important, then we can ask, we need to bring in someone, or we need a study session, or we need something else because we have an insufficient amount of information to be able to make a decision. Okay, thank you, Ellen, for that. Okay, Ben. Yes, I'm gonna listen to Ben and then I'm gonna repeat.
I just want to say the 3-column minutes thing that you sent last night, that is awesome.
Okay.
And that we could forward that. And talk to the vision of what
Okay.
focusing.
Okay. So I told steering this, I think I have an image of this. I might not have an image of this. So I did this thing for myself. Let me see, hold on a second. No, because I have to share that screen. Let me see if I can just find it. No. Okay. I came up with a different way of thinking about minutes. When I reviewed all the Senate minutes for the last year or so, I went through, one column, I had links to the minutes, everything that was included. The middle column, I had a really quick summary of what the main issues were in as neutral a way as possible. And then on the far right column, I had what was decided, who forwarded or seconded, if, is there something that we need to return to? So it's just a different way of thinking about how we present our material. So that's what he's talking about there. Okay, so this is a large part. We've already covered this with the lawyer, Craig, the Brown Act. We've just talked about this, try to get feedback as fast as you can and as much as you can. And with Ellen's proviso that, sometimes it just doesn't seem to affect a division. It's hard to get people interested. So we have a number of conferences that we go to. There's the ASCCC fall and spring plenaries, for instance. I just covered this point about if you want more information. And then, this is, I tried to even decide if I wanted to put this on because this might be seen as particularly English professory and annoying, but maybe it's just best to just keep at least a piece of paper next to you for what struck you as particularly important. Margarita's doing everything she can, which I think would be terrifying, to try and take down all of our notes, but there might be something that just chimes for you. Because people were saying like, well, if I'm brand spanking new, what do I do? So Kim is coming up.
I just want to reflect on the one about the read over the agenda, look for issues. So to try to get feedback in those 72 hours is pretty short. So I do think steering's goal is going to be to have it over the 2 weeks. So it's like, we have the discussion, we try to share really clear information. At Senate, we realize, oh, maybe we need this information or that. Then we've got the 2 weeks to get the feedback. So I just think that that's why the whole discussion action thing is important, and that we will really try to build in that time. So I just wanted to highlight.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. When I wrote that, I was going to add some long extra sentence along those lines. And I think what will happen is once we get going, we will have had a discussion about something. But yes, absolutely. The more time we give people to think, the better. Okay, so this is effective communication. I think it's really useful to ask your division what they want, what counts as effective communication for them. What do they really want to know? How do they want it to be presented? How long should it be? Do they want like a 2-minute video from you? What is it they want? I wish I hadn't said that because that sounds terrifying to me. And then I also think that this is kind of key. Okay, it's not highlighting well. For divisions with low engagement, discuss the consequences of Senate actions and discussions. Maybe help people see that this really will affect them, right? That if we're making decisions about student equity, for instance, this is something that goes across all departments and affects the students, because really the center point of everything we're doing, right, is student success. That's what it has to be. How do we best tailor things for them? And then we had effective notes. Ana Garcia Rayanne shared this out last year, has an amazing way of taking notes, where she even gives timestamps to her division for when something important came up. That works for her, that works for them. But that's how we came up with this discussion of different ways of thinking about minutes. Be creative with what works for you. All right, and that's this point down here, columns with agenda, that I just went over. Okay, I'm going to skip over this one, which is the acronyms. I don't love this analogy, but I think it's useful. Senate builds the highway, subcommittees direct and control the traffic. This is Solano's Community College. This is how we function with committees. There was a lot of work that was done last year with ASCCC, bringing in a consultant, Jeff Dyer, and talking to the Senate about ways to restructure committees and so on. And I think the key is, at least from the way I think, that the school is a living, breathing organism. And the committees are living, breathing organisms. And sometimes we need a committee, sometimes the committee needs to grow and change and shift. So I think one thing that we could ask committees this year is, what's really working in your charge? What's not working? What would you like to do? Those kinds of things. And that we just see it as something that is organic. Any questions so far? Any thoughts? Any yawns? Oh, getting a yawn over there. Yeah. No, I'm joking. Yes, I can send out the 3 columns to everyone. I've got a sample of the 3 columns. I'll send that to everyone. Yeah. Yeah, everybody wants the 3 columns. Okay. So here are our Senate committees, right? We've got 3 different kinds of committees: there's Senate committees, ed program committees, and college-wide committees. And so these are the Senate committees. And for instance, these used to be two separate committees, sabbatical leave and faculty recognition, and they combined those. Just made sense. Okay. All right. Robert's Rules of Order. This is, oh, sorry, I've got a question from Jess. Do you want to? Jess is coming up. Or comment?
So do we have a list of these committees to make sure that we have proper representation from each department?
Yeah,
Someone-
I sent everybody that email earlier in the summer. It was a long list. It was a draft Google Doc of who's on what committee, what the representation is. I can send that link out again if that would be helpful for people.
Maybe that should go on the division meeting. list, because we have to-
Yeah, can you write that down? Thank you. And that's part of why I want to reorganize the website, the Senate website. I want it to be sort of, to do actions or useful things for senators. And anything you guys want, anyone that wants to help us work on that would be great. This does not need to be my iteration. Do you have a comment, Trisha? Do you want to?
Accreditation work group is working on something similar for, there's nobody who's share that.
So Trisha was saying that the accreditation work group was also working on revamping the website.
Finding charges, overlaps.
Defining charges for overlaps. So I think what's useful there is the same idea that a lot of different people are seeing similar issues of overlap. And I'm pausing here because to me that makes sense. Maybe there should be overlap. We're all doing on some level the same thing. We're all trying to teach students. We're all trying to make the students as successful as they can be and as they want to be. Right. All right, Robert's Rules was a really popular category of, including one person who didn't actually put it this way, but it really looked like why? Exclamation point, question mark, right? Why? And why are we doing this? This is what we're using. This is written in our Constitution. Most Senates seem to follow this. The ASCCC has a parliamentarian that you can write to. He gave me this because when I was there at the spring plenary, I went and talked to him about this, and he gave me this it's a cheat sheet. So these are there's 4 pages and including dog prints of how you go about managing a meeting. And I think if we think of this as just 4 pages that you can look at, it works. When I was at Mississippi State, there were a group of, it would be really tempting to call them old Southern boys, but they weren't. They were all Californians, which was slightly terrifying, a bunch who had gone to Berkeley. But they used Robert's Rules of Order like a club. But Robert's Rules is really designed to allow everyone to get to speak and to allow consensus, at least, when you read Robert's Rules on Robert's Rules. So if you want, this is just pretty much something you can look over and read, and I will Xerox, I'm going to use that word, I'm going to Xerox copies on something called paper with something called staples. We'll see how that works. I will bring that, or I will send that if you want that. I will send that across campus mail for you, again, in a mailbox. Totally OG. We'll just see how that works. But if you guys want us to have a training on that, then let's see what we can do to get someone to train us on that so that everybody feels competent. Kathy O'Connor has a question.
A few years ago, we had the parliamentarian that helps with the state academic senate voting come to our campus and meet with our senate and do a training on Robert's Rules. This fellow that's the parliamentarian now, I'm sure would be more than willing to do that. They're really wonderful people. It's very educational. It really helps you understand how this works and why we have to have rules.
Yeah.
For our meetings, so it might be something that you might consider.
So what Kathy O'Connor was just saying was that a few years ago, our Senate had the parliamentarian from the state Senate come and give us a run through on Robert's rules and so on, and that we could do that again. So I will ask you guys if you would like that, and we'll see. I've got a lot of Brittany? No. You do have to have. So that question was, do Brown Act committees have to have Robert's rules? And the answer was no, but that you do have to have some set of rules. So again, that's something, everything's up, right? We can certainly talk about things within the frame of the Constitution. And if we don't like some of the things that are written in the Constitution, then I know that in particular, Ellen and Anna worked really hard last year on constitutional amendments. They didn't go anywhere, which is very disappointing with all of the work that was done. But we can certainly try to change again. So Brittany's here, and then we've got a hand from Ellen.
Ellen, did you want to go first?
Sure, it was just a quick thing, and I'd have to go check the documents to remind myself which is in which, but some things are in the bylaws which are easier to change than the Constitution. The Constitution needs the majority of eligible voting faculty voting in favor of the change, but the bar is lower for the bylaws. So if the and Anna might remember, if the statement that we use Robert's rules is in the bylaws rather than the Constitution, it would be easier to change it.
Okay, the only reason why I was asking if Robert's rules is required is because last year we had a student equity committee, so SEC and then C, student equity and achievement. And what was happening is that we had a lot of members that were in the student equity committee and the other one, and there was a lot of overlap. So people were getting burnt out going to meetings, and we were following Robert's rules. So part of the student equity plan, the president, Mario, she had said that, you know, we need to work with a consultant to go ahead and look at our structure and also to help write the student equity plan. So Dr. Al Solano, who has been working with us on guided pathways, we ended up, you know, getting a couple options from the president, and we went with Al Solano because he's already so familiar with SBCC. So last year we went through the process with him and looking at both of the committees, and his thing was that, you know, we create our own silos and we burn people out by going to too many meetings and having all this overlap. So what we ended up doing is that we combined both meetings together, which actually helped reduce workload for the people serving on both committees, because now we're looking at the budget and also looking at activities, and it flows a lot better. One thing that Al Solano had suggested is to not use Robert's rules, because it actually adds time to meeting and you can be way more productive not using Robert's rules. So like the voting, you know, it's kind of expected people look at the agenda before, and instead of doing like a roll call vote, you know, you ask, does anybody have any objections, that kind of thing. And it makes actually the process flow a little bit easier and we can get more work done. So that was the reason I was asking, because we've kind of gone away from Robert's rules in that committee and kind of looked at that structure. I know, I think last year there was a workshop reimagining structures of the committees on campus. I think that Z had led. So, I mean, that work I think is getting looked at, but it's just something that we've done in another committee and it's worked. So, and it's a consultant telling us like, you know, moving away from Robert's rules isn't like horrible.
Certain types of meetings you have to have. Sometimes meetings don't have to have.
Yeah, we're not exactly there. We do have rules. They're not, we're not a subcommittee of academic senate. So we're not a Brown Act committee, but we still get agendas out 72 hours in advance. We're still looking for a lot of like the Robert's rules thing, but some of the more procedural stuff kind of moved, like we still have public comment. You know, all of that's kind of in there, but it's just not as formalized, but there's still processes and rules.
Okay, and Trisha's coming up.
Two questions. Actually, that committee, they call it the A4A, you know, it's accreditation level 4. So I'm on that. Do I have to miss a lot of the summer because it was during my class? But yeah, I would, if we could have a modified, just personally speaking, a modified Robert's rules. And also I was wondering about the sequence of when do we have to do the important discussions at, 4:45, and then the minutes and the kind of more routine and the kind of stuff in the very beginning when we're all fresh. Is there a way? I mean, my feeling that we kind of get tired towards the end of meetings, and some things felt like just, some things maybe got rushed. And I'm going to confess that when I first started, like with the Robert's rules, there were some times where I thought I was voting for the issue, but I was really voting about whether I was voting for it. And it was confusing a little bit. I mean, you're really, and especially if your internet's going in and out of it. So yeah, I think I would really like to have it simplified. And what are the goals that everyone has a chance to speak? And I think we can do that without having to who seconded? Are you seconding this motion? Do we have to do a friendly amendment? I mean, to me, that just confused it and did not make it more likely that people could share their thoughts, but kind of detracted from the flow of the conversation. So.
Okay, so I'm hearing a clear decision, or at least a clear suggestion from people that we should reconsider Robert's rules. So let's do that. We'll reconsider, and I'll toss that to steering. We'll see what we can come up with, what some options are. We'll bring those to the Senate.
Just to be clear, it is in the Constitution. Anna put that in the chat, so we cannot abandon them without changing the Constitution.
Okay.
So that's something we might want to revisit. There were other, I think, really important changes to the Constitution that the Senate approved last year, but then we didn't get the votes.
Right.
So
yeah. So we can come back to that. Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Anna, for that. Kim is here, and then we technically had to like 12:15, so I'm almost at the end of the slides. So just to give you a heads up, we're almost ready to wrap up.
Just to jump in to say that that's the worst thing about being past president or president-elect for me, which is that you're parliamentarian. I have to think about this stuff. I will say I've been rereading it, and you can, in Robert's rules, do the kind of vote you described, Brittany. You can say just general consensus, so you can really speed things up. And the whole motion thing is confusing, and I think if you put things in writing, the only reason to do that is you can really lose track of what you're actually trying to vote on. So it can be super annoying, but there might be some cases where you still want to go through it. But I think that's a great question. But I also think we can use them more quickly. And I totally, Patricia, I so appreciate your comment about when you discuss what's important. And so I know steering can really think about time limits for things. And I want to say, I don't know, the whole trying to Zoom and be in person is really challenging. And I think it's something we may need to think about as a body. It's the community of being in person is so valuable, but we need to respect how hard, it can be to get in person. So I don't know. I think that's something that makes meetings more challenging too.
Okay, are there any hands raised that I'm missing right here? Okay. So, so why get involved, right? I mean, I'm saying this to people who've already decided to be involved. So thank you for that. We do have 2 Senate seats, which are up, right? We have another HHS, which is vacant, and we have another science senator. So we do need a few more people. And I think the way, at least for me, the thing about the Senate is how do we improve the lives of faculty, and all of which of how do we improve the lives of students? How do we just work as best we can for them? Equity, efficiency, all these various things that we can do to make their lives better. And to go to Kim's point earlier, and the things that we shouldn't do to make their lives worse. Kathy O'Connor.
I think that I have found very discouraging this summer. They can't get registered. They're blocked at every point. Even the process to enroll and go through the orientation videos was outdated. I don't know why anybody gets involved.
Yeah, so, there's a general growling dissent in the room or really assent for what Kathy O'Connor just said, which is it's so hard for students to get enrolled. At every turn, it's difficult. Even once you're enrolled, to try and do the orientation is difficult. Non-credit is even worse. And I've been in a lot of meetings this summer, and everybody says that, and people say it's changing. But it hasn't changed. So that's, I think, something that goes to this. Okay, Brittany's here, and we're down
I'm
to.
so sorry. The enrollment. So this, again, the student equity plan, it's very different than the last iteration. It goes through actually the guided pathways framework, from the steps of before you get to college, to the enrollment aspect, to retention, to transferring, completing like transfer level English and math, and then transferring out. Margaret Prothero has actually done a lot of great work with guided pathways that I just don't think a lot of people know about. She has actually set up this whole thing step by step, because she knows how hard like the enrollment process is. And I wish she was, like here, but it's a step by like, this is what you do, and there's information videos. And I honestly think that that's going to get piloted sometime very soon. It just takes a lot to, I think, go through the steps and things like that. But a lot of the things that we bring up and we know is an issue, but like nothing gets done. I think it's just because sometimes maybe there's a lack of communication, and also we need to outline it like in a plan. So this, again, very soon it'll get shared out, that way everyone can see it. But a lot of the things that we mentioned here are in so many other committees that there is work being done. We just don't know about it because of the silos that we create. So.
I know we're out of time, but I have to just do a quick shout out for the academic counselors. Do an amazing job of dealing with a lot of the things that come from the state too. So it's like easy for us instructional faculty. Oh, why is it so hard? Well, it's complicated. So we're working.
Okay. All right, so that's it. If you hear anything in the background, there's a general growling about how difficult it is. All right, so we are at the last slide, what to bring back to your division. So you will lead in concert perhaps with others from 10:15 to 12. 10:30 to 12. You will lead your division in discussion. One of the questions that we were thinking from steering is, what would you like to know? And then anything that I just really want to leave this up to you. From what Harris said in that discussion, is there anything that you want to bring back that stimulated the way you're thinking? Like that idea of, what do we want to accomplish? Whatever it is that he said or that you started to think about, I would like you to bring that. Please bring that back. That's what steering talked about. We wanted it to be fairly open so you could shape it. Okay. Right. Any questions? Right. And the committee service, we will add the committee service. I will send that out to everybody again, the committee service document. And I noticed a lot of you have been in there, so thank you for that. Send that out again. Okay. Any thoughts, any questions? No? All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate everyone's ideas and everyone's voices. Yeah, Jess is coming up to say one thing. That's okay. Yeah, don't talk. Yeah. This is just so unhappy. I'm trying to stop sharing.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
Probably. I was gonna bring it up during 10+1 about the professional development. So there was an email yesterday by Melissa Menendez about the Raices Faculty Training Institute, and it's applying for a professional development opportunity. And I just wanted to throw it out there. I don't want I mean, the email is pretty long.